Hey, folks, this clip is brought to you by Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey from Lockstill Distillery. Make your own luck, just like Tennessee football's fast paced Rattle and Snap offense with Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey.
No, definitely not. I think the first thing to point out is that there were no huge surprises or anything like that. Either way, there were no big losses, no big flips. You had some teams get hammered by flips. Florida being primary among them. I mean, my goodness, they dropped from number 4 to like number 15. Just brutal, dropped like a rock. And I'll say, man, you hate to see that, don't you? That's tough. Oh man. But they kept their best guy though. They kept Lagway. So congratulations there, I guess. But otherwise, yeah, not a ton of surprises. But I'll just throw it to you, Zach, to start things off. Your thoughts on the day? How do you think Tennessee did?
Yeah, I mean, like we said, a lot of the drama had already taken place. I think in the last couple of days, the last time we talked, I was a little more down on the recruiting stuff, and there's still some misses in this class. You know, there are guys that Tennessee wanted that they didn't get. There are guys that they tried really hard to get, Jordan Seaton, for example, and who knows what's, that situation's still evolving. I guess it's still possible he could end up at Tennessee at this point. I don't think anybody really knows what to expect. He's kind of went silent, it seems like. Could be Maryland, you're kind of hearing now. Might still end up at Colorado. Who knows? I know one of the guys from On 3, said he confirmed that Tennessee finished second to Colorado. So Tennessee was right there earlier this month. But that's a roller coaster. You do somehow get him, and that makes the class look a lot different. But that's one of those where you can't really fault Tennessee for not getting that guy. I know we've kind of talked about that before, but they went and did whatever they could to try to get that guy. Reports of 7-figure NIL deals being thrown out there. But outside of that whole situation, this is like average player rating. It's the best that Tennessee's had, going back to the Philip Fulmer era. So the quality of player, it's like a 91, a little bit over 91 is the average player rating in this class. I think when in the, I have to go back and look to make sure, but when Butch Jones had that top 15 class in top 5 class in 2015, the average player rating was like 85 or 86. It was just
wow.
It was propped up by let me find that for sure just to make sure. But it was propped up by the fact that was before you kind of had the limit on how many you could sign, and they had all that gray shirt, blue shirt kind of madness going on where you could finagle the numbers a little bit, but they had, I don't know, like 30 commits in that class that made that class look a little better than it really was. Here, I got it. Yeah, there were some great players in that class with Kamara, but it just finished third overall, and the average player rating was 89. So not quite as low, but not as impressive. Yeah, not as impressive as what, Heupel has in this class. You've got some real difference makers in this class. I mean, a Mike Matthews, the highest rated wide receiver Tennessee signed. Boo Carter, obviously, who everybody's excited about, especially after hearing Josh Heupel talk about him today. He's been on campus 3 or 4 days, and it sounds like he's already wowed them a little bit. Last week at Boo Carter's kind of signing ceremony he had, because he wasn't going to be able to have one because he's been going through bowl game practices this week. He mentioned that the defense he played in high school was very similar to Tennessee's, so he's already kind of comfortable in that style of scheme. Just the terminology is a bit different. So going through those practices, spring practice, I mean, we'll see how it shakes out. I know Tennessee doesn't really have a reputation for playing safeties young right now, but maybe he gets on the field as a true freshman. Definitely is going to be a factor in the return game, it sounds like. Heupel called him kind of a natural returner there. And other programs, I mean, Colorado, it wasn't just Colorado. They really went hard after him. Like, I think Boo Carter's one of those guys that when it's all said and done, it's going to be like, how was this guy not a 5-star talent? Is it the size wasn't quite what they wanted it to be, maybe because he's not your 6'2" prospect? Whatever the case is, programs really wanted him, and Tennessee had to work really hard to hold off those other programs. So you want to get down about some misses here and there that Heupel and the staff had, you've got to give them credit for managing to hold on to Boo Carter and his teammate too, Marcus Story, that's going to come in and play cornerback, has ideal length for a corner. I think he might be a little underrated too. a couple of really nice pickups there, in-state pickups that can really help this team. So, yeah, you got Jordan Ross, obviously, he could be a premier edge rusher. Guy from 24/7 Sports kind of compared him to a Brian Burns type. If you can get that type of talent there, that's what you got to have to win in the SEC. That's kind of what you're seeing from James Pierce. So you just kind of have another one of those in the pipeline. Bennett Warren coming in could be a future NFL draft pick at offensive tackle. So you've got some really good talent coming in, developmental talent. Tennessee's gonna have to keep them on campus for the next 3 years. I mean, that's another story in its own. We'll see how many of these players stay throughout this class, but so far, Tennessee's trying to build more through high school recruiting than through the transfer portal. They've been able to do that for the most part so far. It's still early in Heupel's tenure. He's still this is his 4th season, so he's really just going through his first kind of full cycle of a 4-year kind of span at this program. But they aren't. They lost some secondary guys that, you'd like to have them for depth, but at the same time, we complained about those guys all season long, so you can't really complain about them leaving. I think Tyler Barron's the only real huge loss that, and you got guys to replace Barron. You got the talent there, but Tyler Barron is an NFL type talent. I'm not going to say he's going to go be a Pro Bowler or anything like that, but he'll be in an NFL roster. He'll be in a rotation somewhere. It's a guy that would have helped Tennessee in 2024. But outside of that, you were able to keep the guys you wanted to keep. So we'll see how this strategy plays out for Heupel. It's clear that, there's kind of a line drawn in the sand right now. And Lane Kiffin's on one side of it, trying to go all out in the portal and seeing how that works. Heupel's kind of on the other side of it. Like, we're going to get the guys that fit this program, that we believe in, that we've evaluated, that we've spent time building these relationships with, that fit into our culture. Not guys that we've known for 10 minutes that we're saying, come over here and we'll give you $1 million to play for one season. We'll see which approach works the best. It's going to play out on the field one way or the other. So I applaud Heupel for trying to build it this way. I hope it works out. I think it is the best way to kind of build a program like this and supplement it through the portal. And Tennessee's got some really nice portal additions. Could make a couple more too. I think that the pickup from Oregon State, Jermod McCoy, is going to be a super, super underrated pickup. Yeah. Played a lot as a true freshman, had a couple of interceptions. It's hard to get on the field as a cornerback as a true freshman at any program. So I think that's a huge pickup. So I'm not quite as down on all of this as I was, a week and a half ago.
Yeah, it's kind of two conversations to me. One that's more of the just acute view of this class. Like, what do I think of the class? Take away any real context that's surrounding it. And I think the class is pretty good. I really like some of the dudes that they're coming in for, a lot of the reasons that you're saying there. I think Mike Matthews, Braylon Staley both have the potential to be dogs. Mike Matthews, he looks like a guy that you look at him and you go like, yeah, that's a future NFL player.
Side note, real quick because you mentioned Braylon Staley. That one I think annoyed Shane Beamer quite a bit. That was the number one receiver in the state of South Carolina. I think somebody said he made a comment today about like, we got the number one wide receiver in the state or something. So it's that one's eating away at him. So just, even better there, kind of a side note.
Yeah, I love that, obviously, because Beamer can screw off. And yeah, I know they tried to make a late push, according to reports, for Braylon Staley, and he still chose to come to Tennessee. That's great. Jake Merklinger, I think he has the potential to be a solid quarterback. Some of these O-line recruits look pretty good. Anderson, Satterwhite, and you go down the list. Like there's some talent here. Of course, I think the one that a lot of people look at defensively, Jordan Ross, looks like he could be an absolute dog with the coaching from Rodney Garner. There's dudes in this class, no doubt about it. And that's like genuinely, I'm not setting this up to try to rain on the parade. It really is a set of players that I'm pretty excited about to see. And we'll talk about the portal in a second. And I would agree that you need more portal players, and we can go into depth there in just a minute. But I like the guys that they picked up so far. And so you can look at it in that acute sense and say that there's some real dudes here. That's awesome. And then you back out and you discuss the context, and it becomes a little murkier. I'm not here to be negative. I seriously am not, because I went on Twitter last night and I spoke my mind. And
Nothing good ever comes from I went on Twitter last night when the sentence
yeah, just don't do
starts
it.
that way.
Don't tweet. Don't. That's the real key. No, don't ever go on Twitter. Went on Twitter last night, and you had a three-star recruit chose Mizzou over Tennessee, and I just tweeted out the amount of losses that Josh Heupel has taken in this recruiting cycle is concerning. You have to have more dudes to play at an elite level long term. That's all I said. And you could always be better off by having more context on Twitter. It's so short that you can't add everything that you need to say around it. The thing that I think would have made some people less annoyed with it was if I could have just said the amount of losses that Tennessee has had, and I'm not talking just about this one tonight. A lot of people were like, "You're getting mad over a 3-star player that Tennessee didn't even want a month ago going to Missouri." No. Stop. First of all, that's not what I'm saying. You know that. They know that. The people that are saying that, they know that's not what I'm saying. I tried to go back and remember a list of some of the players. I'm talking about the kid last night. Sure, but take it or leave it. He would have been a nice addition. Sensabaugh is the kid's name.
Yeah,
he would have been nice. I'm not like particularly upset. But you look back, Cam Michael, Jordan Seaton, who we did a whole thing on here, Kamarion Franklin, Williams Winery, Cameron Fountain. Like there's a
Ryan
whole
Wingo.
Ryan Wing, yeah, a whole set of dudes that Tennessee put a lot of resources towards trying to get, like really tried hard. This wasn't like, oh, we didn't really want him, and so he didn't. No, they really tried for some of these kids, and they just kept coming in second and coming in second and coming in second and coming in second, and not winning out. They did win out on some guys. Boo Carter, great. Mike Matthews, great. Jason Dyer says in the comments here, Kai Bates, that's another one that they missed out on. It was just miss after miss after miss after miss after miss after miss after miss. And why? And you look at some of the things that happened afterwards. This wasn't exactly the same, but they lose Jonathan Eccles last week, and they turn around and have to sign a guy who's just a 3-star, and you kind of look and you go like, yeah, that's an Eccles replacement for sure.
Yeah, that's what that was.
I look at it, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, they weren't begging him to stay." Well, they didn't have anybody lined up right behind him. Clearly.
Yeah, they weren't. I mean, they were going to sign him.
They were, and they lost him.
Few things go better with a Tennessee sports victory than an awesome whiskey. And actually, me and Jonathan Crompton had a drink of whiskey during the postgame show of every football win this past season. And more specifically, we had Rattle and Snap Tennessee Select Straight Whiskey. You can see it right there behind me. Log Still Distillery has released a new Tennessee whiskey product line called Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey, named after a long-forgotten game of chance. Rattle and Snap is a whiskey for those who make their own luck. There's a 4-year and an 8-year version of Rattle and Snap whiskey, and actually, this one behind me is the 4-year version right here. It's perfect for making your favorite whiskey cocktails or just drinking neat. It's really great stuff, and I mean, you can see it there. The bottle looks great. 2, you can find Rattle and Snap right now in stores across Tennessee, and Rattle and Snap is also available in Kentucky, Indiana, and Mississippi. So run, don't walk to get yourself some Rattle and Snap whiskey, and follow Rattle and Snap on Instagram at Rattle and Snap Whiskey. That is Rattle and Snap Tennessee Select Straight Whiskey.
To the old offensive coordinator. And so I look at that, and like I said, it's 2 conversations. I like this class, and I like the dudes in it. There's some real talent here. Also, there's a concerning element here. It is both. And I don't think that you can have this full conversation without pointing out both of those things. And that's why I said last night, I tweeted this out with this GIF. I said,
why are you booing me? I'm right.
That was me last night. Why are you booing me? I'm right. This is concerning. What do you want me to say? Like, it is a good class, and there's a concerning element here because I want to know your thoughts on this, Zach. The thing that I think, this is my theory, this staff, coaching staff, just does not have a lot of dog recruiters on it. It just doesn't. I don't think. And maybe you could criticize the NIL too, but we don't know enough about the behind the scenes of the NIL to speak definitively about that. I don't think. But I mean, you could question them too and ask, what exactly is going on there and the way that they work with the staff and things like that. But recruiting is just 24/7, 365. You got to be an absolute just down dirty dog working constantly in the mud. And I don't know that I see that with this staff. Maybe some dudes, but definitely not a lot of them. What do you think?
I think it's multiple things at play. I don't think it's just one thing that you can point at. I do think what you're saying is right. I know I have heard firsthand that there are some people, on this staff that don't recruit quite as hard as they should have, or they should, or they feel like they could, or others feel like they could. We've heard that. I've heard it. Feel pretty confident that is part of some of the issues. There's also some of the NIL stuff. I think the way this staff or Josh Heupel wants to build these recruiting classes, he probably, with the culture being so important, it's hard for them to go land a recruit that plays a position that somebody else in your team plays, and you're going to pay them more than that guy's making, and then you got to pay that guy more, and it just devolves into this whole, messy thing. I think that's part of it. I don't think that's all of it. I don't think that's every situation. I think it is kind of each case is its own, situation. And I think that is a factor in it. I think they're, trying to recruit the guys to this culture that are going to stick around for several years, because I think with recruiting, we're going to have to look at these classes so much differently than we used to. Even though Tennessee fans kind of have a head start on this because some of those Butch Jones classes that would fall apart over a couple of years, but you've got to look at, okay, this is what this class was in December of 2023. Now in the fall of 2025 and 2026, when most of these guys are supposed to be in their prime, really contributing, how many of them are still here? And that's when you can really judge who signed. I mean, the stars and all that, yeah, you got to sign 4-star and 5-star guys. We've seen time and time again that does equal championships. The more 4- and 5-star players you have, the more likely you are to have some studs, the more likely you are to win games. That's definitely part of the formula. But now part of that formula is keeping those guys. And do they actually ever make an impact for you? I mean, everybody was excited when Addison Nichols signed, year before last, whenever. Never made an impact. All that excitement. I'm sure we talked about him on this podcast, what he could be for Tennessee. Never panned out. None of that panned out. That player it's almost like a wasted spot. And that's not his fault. It's not staff's fault. That's just how it goes in recruiting sometimes. You have hits, you have misses, whatever the case. So I think that's part of it. Is it takes a little bit longer to evaluate these classes, and especially the way Tennessee's trying to build it, where that's kind of factored into the way they're putting these classes together. But I do think you've got to go land some of those Wingos and Wineries and Kai Bates, Cam Michael. Like, you've got to win your fair share of those battles somehow, some way. I mean, if Jordan Seaton's committing to Colorado and he's turning down this money from Tennessee, I don't care if it's Deion Sanders. I don't care who it is. Plenty of people went head-to-head with Deion and won out. Tennessee did it with Boo Carter. You've got to be better building that relationship somehow, some way. Clearly, that was the determining factor there. So that is, I think, part of the factor in some of these recruiting losses is the relationships and the, like you said, just having dogs that want to go out there and do it 24/7. It's a tough job, but if you want to stick around in the SEC, you have to do it. Like Heupel said today, the footprint of the SEC, it's still so small. It's so regional for the most part. Yeah, you're getting some guys nationwide, but the bulk of these players are coming from the Southeast, and you've got to go up against Kirby Smart. You've got to go up against Nick Saban. Now Brian Kelly. Florida, no matter who's there, seems to get 4- and 5-star guys. Like, you have to Auburn with Hugh Freeze now, whatever voodoo he puts on commits or players that make them want to go play for him. I don't know. Lane Kiffin, like, you've got to be able to outwork those guys. And I do think that there's a little bit of that's lacking.
I just looked. There's so much of this to kind of unpack, but I just look at like the Georgia game. this year. That talent gap, and we talked about it at length, that talent gap's just huge. They embarrassed you on your own home field, and it was because their team is filled with 5-star players and yours is not. And that, in response to that tweet last night, a lot of Tennessee fans said, oh, well, this is the highest average player rating that Tennessee has had in a recruiting class in like 15 years, I think somebody was saying. I didn't fact check it.
It is.
I'll take them out to work. Yeah, so there you go. But I would say this. These are the teams that have a higher average player rating, some by a pretty significant amount, than Tennessee this year. Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Auburn, Texas A&M, Florida, Notre Dame, Oregon, Florida State. And then South Carolina is pulling up just right behind you. They're next in line to Tennessee there, and Oklahoma is next behind them. Like you're not closing that gap talent-wise with this class. It's at some positions, Jordan Ross on that edge, he's true 5-star. I think he's going to be really an excellent player. Mike Matthews, true 5-star. But you go down that list, and it is just a fact. Those teams that recruit at that elite level with that really high level set of dudes, they win those national championships. Period. End of story. I wish that wasn't how it was. Of course, I wish it was like college basketball where you get a lot more underdogs. Personally, to me, I like that a lot more. It's a lot more compelling. But that's not how it is. Those elite teams win. And so when you clock in a recruiting class where you struck out on all of these dudes, I mean, we just listed them. It's got to be close to 10, if not more than 10 dudes that you really worked hard on, and every single one of them you came in second. Like that can't be the way that it is if you want to close that talent gap and be at that national championship level. Sure, I think we've said it like this in weeks past. With the 12-team playoff, you're probably going to be good enough in some of these years to make that 12-team playoff. And that's fun, and that's great. You'll probably win 10 games, hopefully 11, maybe something like that. And then you'll make it to that playoff and you lose in the first round because you're not as good as those elite teams. You didn't close that talent gap. And that's, you're the top half of the SEC. You're still ranked higher than South Carolina and all. I mean, even Oklahoma this year. But when the rubber truly meets the road, you are not in a material way closing that talent gap. And that's just concerning to me. I don't know another way to frame it. Again, good class with some really fun guys in it. This element cannot just be skipped over because it's so meaningful. It really is. Like this is just like I look at the way that Heupel coaches, where he can really get dudes, especially when he gets a good quarterback. Clearly, he can really take teams to another level and potentially make them better than they probably should be. Just think if you could get elite guys, seriously. And I guess it's disappointing in that you look at going 11-2, and you had so much momentum and you beat Alabama and you did all this stuff. And you came in second for all of those guys, and you're losing to those. That's who you're losing to. Your Georgias, your Alabamas. This year, Missouri. Why are you losing to Missouri in recruiting? What are you doing? Why are we losing to Missouri in recruiting? What? I don't know who's behind that, whose fault that is. Stop. None of that. No losing to Missouri in recruiting. That's ridiculous. So, I don't know. Again, I seriously don't mean to be negative, but that's just part of this conversation. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a complex conversation where you've got some good things like we hit on at the beginning, some good players that you've signed, some difference makers, a lot of guys you missed on. There's just so much at play, but ultimately, yeah, you do have to have better players than everybody else. Like that's the only way you're going to win a championship. That's what would have beat Georgia in 2022 in Athens if you had a better roster than they did. Maybe it prevents the collapse of South Carolina. You've just It is the biggest thing.